So I want to talk a little bit about what you've been hinting at towards your white paper with the DAC of DACs, or the DAO of DAOs. And you mentioned shared liquidity, shared incentives with other EOS IO chains, but within EOS itself, it would be shared incentives, shared liquidity between DACs and DAOs. Could you kind of just give an overview of how you envision Eden 2.0? And especially for me, I think it'd be important to share kind of the DeFi aspects of it all, because that's something that EOS has been lacking, is protocol level like rewards and yield that other chains have benefited from.
So, we built Eden, and Eden's been a fantastic experiment in democratic governance. And I think a lot of the people that participated in it have really enjoyed the fact that they got to meet other people, they got to hear ideas, they felt heard, and the community genuinely put up quality leaders, right? We've got Gray Mass team represented, we've got Violet Garden, we've got EOS Bees, and Chris Barnes, who's been out there advocating for EOS and governance and all that. Pick some really quality people out of 100 plus people that are participating, and they had fun doing it. I think that we learned a lot and that we can iterate. And so Eden 2.0 is what my team's designing now, taking all those lessons learned, bringing a token into the mix to allow internal accounting inside of a particular Eden community, which is a little bit more flexible, right? It's like a dynamically allocating the budget instead of having to directly denominate everything. But I'm really excited about the white paper. I've been thinking it through, and I've concluded that I want to release a video that explains the entire process, and I'm going to release the video before the white paper, because I think the white paper is one of those things that academics want a lot of precision, and they want all the details there, and they're going to reference it for a long time to come. A video is probably more of in line with what everyone actually wants to know, what you're trying to get me to answer in advance here. I think it'd be better served for everyone for me to present it with the proper graphics and diagrams so that people can follow what I'm talking about. But generally speaking, all these different projects, all these different tokens that build on a chain, all these DACs, decentralized autonomous communities, they all have a token and they want to collaborate, and you want liquidity. So I am a big fan of network provided DeFi. That's what some of the motivation behind my changes to the token contract, adding built-in support for bank core liquidity between things, is because I know that if you have a lot of different DACs running on a chain, they all have their own token, they all benefit from having built-in liquidity. They all benefit from being able to transact on a pay a fee basis instead of having to get confused with the resource system on EOS. And if there's that shared infrastructure there, then you can have all these DACs. Now, you can view a DAC, if you view the blockchain like a country, it's a territory. And all these DACs as companies within that territory, you're really creating a democracy of companies, right? Because each of those DACs has an interest in the underlying infrastructure. They're dependent on the underlying infrastructure. If the underlying infrastructure breaks one DAC, that's going to be a problem, right? And so I think each DAC needs to have a representative, and that representative comes up, and that protocol level decisions are made by the representatives from all the DACs, rather than all the people individually like advocating for protocol level changes. So it's the democracy of democracies. Each DAC is democratic. The network as a whole is a democracy of those DACs. Each DAC gets one vote, rather than the DAC with the most users getting all the votes and all the other DACs get nothing. It's really about a way of, if a community is going to build on a particular protocol, they want to be represented and have some stake in the underlying things. If you're going to move to a country and you're going to build a business and buy a house, you're going to want to know that you're represented in that country, and they're not going to just change the rules and invalidate your business and regulate you out of existence. And that's what every DAC has. So when I say DAC of DACs or DAO DAOs or democracy of democracies, that's what I'm saying. It's like saying the United States is a democracy of states. Each state gets one vote. Within each state, it's a democracy of counties. And within each county, it's a democracy of towns. And with each town, it's a democracy of people. Right? That's a fractal approach to governance. Keeps decisions made as local as possible. You build consensus, you bubble it up, and then that whole community expresses the consensus to the next level up, and so on and so forth. This is the direction I'm taking, and I'm really, really excited about Eden 2.0. I'm really, really excited about our new branding that I'm just itching to release, but I want to make sure it's perfect before it comes out. I guess you guys on the call know what it is, but a lot of good things are coming, and I think that it has potential to revolutionize how people build decentralized autonomous communities, self-funding, self-motivating, self-growing communities. And if that works how I think it's going to work, then you're going to have all kinds of people that come to EOS for the very first time. They're inviting people to EOS. The account creation problem is going to be so transparent that people aren't even thinking about it anymore. And it's just going to be an incredibly usable experience. It's going to cause a lot of communities to have tokens that are going to go up in value. All these tokens going up in value are on the network with shared liquidity with EOS, which brings EOS up, and they all any community grows, brings up all the other communities around it. And I think the power of this model is when you contribute to a community, you can have an outsized influence on the local community, and you get an outsized percentage of the rewards of that community growing. Right? If you make a difference in your town and your town grows, you reach profit, but your entire state benefits, the whole country benefits from that town growing. But the people in the town should benefit the most, and the farther away you are from where the change was, the less the benefit should go. If you have a federal government that's trying to reap all the profits of someone trying to contribute to their town, you're not going to have the growth that you need for the town. You're not going to have the economic incentive. It's like trying to tell an entrepreneur, you're going to work for salary and you don't get to reap any equity. You don't see the outsized growth of your contributions when all you do is get paid for the job and you don't get exposure to the upside of your specific actions. And that's why you need a fractal structure. That's why you need many tokens, so that you motivate more total contributions and they all bubble up to result in the entire ecosystem growing. And if you have that many communities, and you have that many tokens, you're going to need a decentralized exchange between them all. You're going to need DeFi and some serious DeFi. And I think EOS is the perfect platform for building those DeFi applications, whether it's Bancor or whether it's a hybrid order book like Bullish has implemented. There's all kinds of different things that we could implement on the EOS blockchain. So
that's
really
what has me the most excited. And I think communicating that to the EOS community, so even people who aren't necessarily interested in the governance aspects of the DAC of DACs, the DeFi aspects of it are going to be quite innovative. So like with the protocol owned liquidity, for example, the more DACs there are, the more bets. It's kind of like being a VC and you make a bunch of small bets into hundreds of companies. You only need a couple unicorns and you win as a VC. So that's essentially what EOS could potentially do with this model. And let me stipulate that the block producers would have the ultimate say on if anything's being done with an inflation distribution into the DAC of DACs model that you've presented some graphics for already, and you'll continue to. But if you imagine a liquidity pool where one EOS equals one DAN DAC token, they're both being fed in from inflation, and then the DAN token goes 10x. Both EOS and DAN's DAC only contributed one token each initially, but then DAN's token went way up. That would essentially create a scenario where a bunch of EOS that's not necessarily coming from inflation is getting locked up into that liquidity pool, because now there's only 1/10 of a DAN token in the relay, but then there's 10 EOS tokens in the relay, even though the protocol only contributed one EOS in this situation. So any of these DACs, if their value were to go up, it's going to result in a lot of EOS getting locked up by the protocol. So that's something people need to understand, is it's going to generate locked up protocol owned liquidity that's not going anywhere. The EOS network's not going to pull their liquidity out. If it's got a lot of EOS in there, it's in there for good until people sell into it. The other thing is it's fee generation. It's a DEX, essentially. Like, there's going to be so much swapping between DAX and DAX, DAX and EOS. All of this swapping and arbitrage is just going to create fees. What we do with those
becomes
fees,
a DEX, essentially. The whole application is the DEX.
Yes. Stated another way, if you create a model that allows people to come and build DAX easily without having to write any code, right? That's, I think, going to be the magic. When people can have an idea of a decentralized community that has some subjective public good that they want to achieve, they can come, they can invite people, they can start doing stuff, and they can start creating their own token. And why do they do this on EOS and not somewhere else? Because EOS has built-in liquidity for their token. Because EOS has tools that allow them to do it without having to write a single line of code. And that DEX aspect of things is why people say, well, I'm going to build it here. If I build it on Ethereum, I'm going to have to write code. I'm going to have to manage contracts. I'm going to have to figure out how to get liquidity over there. It's not baked in, and the incentives aren't there for collaboration between communities. And you go to other chains and they have to do these different things. These other chains won't have the governance model that allows subjective consensus building to achieve public goods. And so by creating those tools, it's like an exchange subsidizing, or an exchange starting up that's helping people create startups that are going to list on the exchange. And then you don't need anyone else because you've created all the startups, and all those startups have people that are motivated to see them grow. And you don't care which one of those startups is successful. Some of them will be, and some of them will fail. But all the energy is highly focused on the founders of all those different DACs and those communities, and all those incentives are for growth. And all that entrepreneurial spirit can flow in. And then the EOS liquidity DEX between it all is just going to be the ideal place to start your community. And I think that's the future I see with Eden 2.0, is making it really easy to bootstrap communities, making it super incentivizing people to invite people to the communities, and reducing barriers to entry to join. So unlike Eden 1.0, there's going to be no membership fees. There's going to be no induction ceremony, and things like that. And it's going to be super streamlined. So lots of lessons learned. I'm really excited about releasing more information about it in the coming week.
Now, from ENF side of things, Dan's got an idea. Dan's got an application that he just described to you. That may, in theory, work, but it may not work in reality. The ENF is hedging the bets, right? So it's supportive of that vision. The ENF likes that vision, but it's going to take a while. It's going to take time. Even if tomorrow that was live, there's not necessarily demand for that product tomorrow. In the meantime, the ENF doesn't stop doing what it is doing. And so, for example, we talked about DeFi, we talked about yield. The ENF just, I guess, dropped some alpha yesterday that it's also exploring a yield plus that group is forming. So in the meantime, this is an application that the network is willing to support, but there are other applications or other use cases that the network is currently supporting and will continue to support that it doesn't even know that it's going to support because they're not there yet. All of this can happen at the same time. The network, see, maybe now people are starting to see the difference between the ENF and Dan, and how one works for all token holders. The other one is trying to build an application that will be leveraged ideally from all token holders, and wants to have something that essentially, kind of that analogy of changing the engine while the plane is flying, that at some point there would be a transition for that to happen on EOS instead of going to do another ICO. In the meantime, though, we're not there yet, so we need to continue placing other bets, doing other things, mitigating our risks, hedging on Dan's idea, Dan in a way is also hedging on EOS, hedging on the ENF ideas, and everybody's hedging on each other. And what Dan mentioned with the DAO of DAOs, or the communities that are formed, it also goes back to, why would somebody work on something that you want them to work on? Within Eden 2.0, each community would be able to work on what they believe adds value and what they're passionate about. And if the market determines that that has value, that rises. If the market determines that that doesn't have value, that doesn't rise. But because you're placing so many bets, again, going back on the idea that one of them may hit, and if that one hits, these are tried and tested methods, the more bets you place, if you mitigate risk, right? So it's not just willy-nilly again. If you have a good system in place, the more bets you place, the higher the likelihood of having one hit that rises everybody else. And that's how you upgrade. And if you create a system that's able to do this efficiently and rapidly, then your upgrades end up happening way more frequently than they would have if you're just spending the time waiting around for one thing. So going back to Dan's working on something, I agree with that vision. I think that's an awesome vision. I think that there's future in that, but it will take time. And the ENF also wants to hedge that may not work as planned, just like Eden 1.0. Certain things work, learn. All right, there might be an Eden 3.0. Continue iterating. That can happen while other things are happening as well. They're not mutually exclusive. And that's why I think Dan and I share a common vision, while also maybe not agreeing on the near-term approach or the medium-term approach, but the idea is the North Star is still there. We're still heading towards that idea. How we get to it, we're taking multiple different paths at once to see which one will get there faster, essentially.
Yeah, I would like to take an opportunity to clear up some misconceptions that I've seen in the community about Eden 1.0. I've been talking about Eden 2.0. That doesn't invalidate the work that people are doing in Eden 1.0. We're still going to have another Eden 1.0 election. I assume that there's still going to be funding from the ENF, because it's still electing leaders, and those leaders have funds, and they are each pursuing their own visions, whether it's the bees or Anchor Wallet and whatnot. So it is successfully funding infrastructure on EOS as it is, and it can continue to operate while we're building the 2.0. Just for some general timelines, I would expect that the 2.0 will be armed and fully operational by the end of the year, but it's a big effort. It's bigger than Eden 1.0 in terms of what we're attempting to achieve. And a lot of what we're attempting to achieve is building on top of some of the proposals I put out in blog posts this week, right? The proposals for tokens and symbol auctions. Yeah, I want to create lots of communities. I want these communities to be able to create tokens. And I want them to be able to do so without having to deploy contracts and all these, and then they need a liquidity, right? And so I'm attempting to get the EOS network to upgrade in ways that benefits all DACs, anyone who might want to issue a token, anyone who's going to need a liquidity, to benefit from the same infrastructure that I'm attempting to build for Eden 2.0 communities. And so, yeah, and I can release that code earlier than I can release the final full governance 2.0 for Eden, which is going to take more UI development, more smart contract development. But all of these things are part of a grand vision. I'm not just willy-nilly throwing out, hey, let's enhance the names. Hey, let's add symbol auctions. Let's do this thing. What's it all for? Well, it's because I'm trying to bootstrap DeFi for between all the different communities of all the Edens I want to create, and do so in a way that benefits maximally all EOS holders. And so that Eden 2.0 can use the same shared infrastructure as other tokens, and therefore we can get liquidity between Eden communities and other tokens on the network. And I think that allowing EOS to focus on the DeFi, the economic links between all the DACs that are being created on the EOS network, is a core function that makes EOS valuable. If EOS isn't providing that, then you can go to any chain, because you're going to have to provide it all for your own application anyway. EOS providing that liquidity, that is the thing that's going to drive people to build on EOS. instead of build someplace else.
All right, and so the ENF recognizes that as well, going back to yield plus. Some people just want to have a reason to hold that token in the meantime. Some people want to contribute, some people want to be active, some people value governance, other people value the investment side of things, other people value the application side of things. What we're trying to do as well is, all right, these are the different things that people may value. Let's try to fill each gap as best as possible and seeing what sticks, right? Throwing that spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. I also want to go back to what Dan just said. So he gave you a little bit more insight on what his grand vision is, right? And if he waits until all that grand vision is fleshed out before releasing a paper or before giving the community a chance to see here's what all it is, then people will complain. So put yourself in Dan's shoes. He can't win. If he waits until all that's done, then you're going to complain that you weren't part of the process and that you didn't get a chance to maybe provide feedback on that ultimate thing. So Dan chooses to release little snippets of what's going on while telling you what he's working on as well. But then you complain that you didn't get that smaller level of, before even he wrote that post, of being part of that process. So he does that in Telegram. And so he does the back and forth with you in Telegram, and he tries to iterate, all iterating in real time for that big thing. But he can't win, because no matter when he releases that information, or whenever he attempts to start gathering that feedback, will never be satisfactory to everybody who ultimately just wants to be in Dan's brain and just seeing it as it's being created, or in Dan's team. And that's not possible. And it's the same thing with all the working groups. Some people, the working groups are attempting to reach out to as many people as possible, but they will fail. They will not be able to reach out to every single person. That's not possible. And so even when they release their blue papers, I know that they're going to get the same flack that in some cases they're giving to Dan, of saying, why, hey, I wasn't in that working group. I didn't get a chance to submit feedback and such. And so is it fait accompli that your blue paper is what's going to happen? No, at some point, it's good enough to be able to present, to start gathering feedback. And that loop is continuous. It's continual. So Dan's got a vision right now that he says is going to take a few years maybe to achieve the final of everything's now in place, if it even works that way. In the meantime, it's going to be a continuous iterative process. That is the process. That is what I guess I believe is a good way forward. And I would imagine that Dan also agrees that is also a good way forward. But we can never win, because whenever we release that information, is never going to be good enough. Whoever's included in that will never be good enough. It never ends.
I would say the flip side to what you just said is that there have been other criticisms. You're suggesting these things, but we don't understand your grand vision. Give us the grand vision.
That's what I'm trying to do.
They want the grand vision in order to understand the thing that I've released today. Like, how does this name thing fit into the grand vision? They're like, well, the grand vision is only 80% fleshed out and is in flux. And I want to get it a little bit more clear, because otherwise it's going to be even more confusion. All right, are we talking about Dan's vision on this date, or the week after, or the week after, or the week after? I got to wait until the rate of change slows down so that people are not confused and they're talking past each other. They're like, well, some people read the first paper and some people read the second, some people read the third. And now they're all confused talking to each other, because they're like, not everyone follows everything all the time, and they can't. And I think there's another thing that everyone who's following along needs to be aware of, because it's not necessarily even obvious, but the squeaky wheel is not the majority. The people complaining are not representative of the masses. There could be
sometimes they are, but by default they're not. But sometimes they are, but by default it doesn't mean they are.
I'm saying it's not correlation causation.
Correct.
Right. People speak up when they see something they don't like more often than they speak up when they see something they do like. Oh, great. Dan's doing what I want. I don't need to say anything. I'll just sit back and be happy. Oh, Dan's doing something I don't like. I'm going to, yell and scream. And if you just allow that to bias your impression of what the actual consensus is, then you want to. That's why we need processes like Eden, where you're randomly grouped with people and you can talk about things. And you can actually see what people think, instead of what the 5 loudest people in the room who won't shut up about whatever it is that's upsetting them are complaining about. So I'm just pointing out that by being aware of that, if you see something you like, speak up. We need more people to say, yes, I like that direction, to balance out the perception of all the squeaky wheels that are going to say, oh, I don't like that direction. And then the community can actually get a better sense of things, and we have more positive experience. Because if all people see is the dissent, all right, Dan's got this opinion, Syed's got this opinion, Aaron's got this opinion, Eve's got this opinion. If they just see that and they don't see all the, hey, actually, you know, there's a lot of good stuff here, then that's actually toxic to the community as well. So you can contribute to the community, you can contribute to the success of EOS by voicing the things you like. Let's try to be a culture of saying, yes, that's great. That would make things awesome if we had that. I like that you're exploring that idea, instead of just the complaining side of things. And remember that the complainers are often, but not always, a loud minority.
Well, there's also the other side of the coin as well, where there's some people that no matter what you say, it's the best thing since sliced bread, right? And so it's also filtering, and that's the role of the ENF as well. What actually has value and what actually has a reasoning behind that value, what actually has criticism, and what are those valid criticisms, and what's kind of at the extreme that anything that Dan says or anything the ENF says is amazing, anything that Dan says is garbage, anything the ENF says is garbage. There's somewhere in between. And that's basically the filter and the process that needs to occur, the line that we talked about earlier. That's a never ending thing. Getting better at that and being in this position to even be able to be in that position is something that we now have to deal with because we've never had to deal with before.
I will say that because the ENF exists, because it's been funding improvements, because I feel like my voice is heard, I feel like I can build on EOS. And I'm sure other people feel like they can build on EOS now because of the work the ENF is doing. Prior to the ENF existing, my experience was, well, I have some ideas, but there's no way in the world the blockchain would ever adopt them because I can't corral all the block producers and get the consensus and make these things happen. So that feeling of helplessness is what causes people to abandon projects. And I want to be here and I want to make a difference. And I think I have a lot of value I can contribute. And I think there's a lot of people that want me to contribute that value. And so where EOS is today compared to where it was a year ago, I am a whole lot more hopeful that the ship can be steered in a positive direction in a timely manner. And that is very, very bright.
One of the challenges with the ENF on that is how, and going back on basically how we got here, from my point of view, looking at Dan's experience and Dan's other projects. From my point of view, Dan in BitShares was not able to get funded by the network. And so he leaves and does a second project, a second ICO. And then within that project, then there's the disagreement with the network itself, as well as then I guess the entity itself. And so he leaves, creates another one. We have the same thing in EOS where he leaves Block.One, but it's the first time that the network maybe has the potential to fund Dan's ideas or to work with Dan, that possibly exists so that he doesn't go elsewhere. It is the first time that we're in that position to maybe able to do that so that Dan can now build on EOS, eat his own dog food, no longer being chained by the corporate entity that created that product in the first place. So one of the things that I told Dan early is, and this is a continuous challenge every time Dan writes a post, because I just get so many messages in the background. But how can I essentially enable Dan to be autonomous and to be able to be Dan? Because I think everybody, I think there's somewhat of a consensus that when Dan is able to be autonomous is when Dan shines. When Dan is able to work on what he's passionate about, that's when we see a massive inflow of community members. That's when we see value being created, right? It does not stop other people from also doing the same thing, but we're here in part because of Dan. We're in EOS because he created EOS. So how can we recreate that? So let Dan be autonomous however, by having accountability, because the network is funding in part Dan. So one of the ways that we decide to do that is that Dan proposes something, and if he if he completes that, and if the network agrees to it, they potentially refund him, or they pay him back for that, right? So he does the work beforehand. Now, that doesn't mean that anything that he does and everything that he does gets funded by the network. And so I would imagine that Dan also wants to be autonomous at some point, where it's no longer the chain itself funding him, but that he's incentivized to build on that product. So, and the ENF is juggling all of that. While how can we enable Dan, support Dan, surround Dan? Because there is something there. There's clearly something there. But then how do we also ensure that that doesn't impede on others from also being amplified, leveraged, supported, and essentially surrounded and helped, so that they can also do the same thing? And that's the big challenge with the ENF. How do we do that, not just for him, but for everybody else, so that everybody feels like they've got a place and they want to build on EOS. They're supported to build on EOS. And then how do we then eventually make the ENF no longer the entity that it is, because now it's part of potentially Dan's process of the DAO of DAOs, and maybe the ENF is the DAO of DAOs. Because this doesn't make sense for me to be benevolent forever, in the sense that if I'm no longer there tomorrow, if I get hit by a car tomorrow, all this crumbles. So we need to figure out a way so that that is no longer the case in the future. Again, that's where Dan and I agree on the vision of, let's work towards something so that I essentially can replace myself. Because if not, it's not sustainable. If not, we're going to hit a wall at some point. It makes no sense. But we're in a special situation where it does make sense right now. How do we improve it going forward?
Yeah, we all need to build systems that can run without us, right? I'm super proud that the BitShares community, that the Steam community, that the Hive community, and now the EOS community is able to operate and advance independently. They're self-sustaining organisms, and I made sure that BitShares had a funding mechanism to make that happen. And all these systems had some kind of governance in them that was good enough to allow the community to make forward progress. And that's still the plan. The way I'm starting to think about leadership and governance is strong communities need a leader, and people follow the leader, but the leader cannot have political power. And I don't have political power. I can only lead by my sheer influence and my ability to cast the vision that people believe in. And then the community can support and adopt the ideas or not. But it's that check and balance between a leader and a political process that protects against, like, let's say I go rogue, right? Then, all right, I'm out because I went completely rogue. But if you think about Twitter, everyone starts signing up, they start using it, and then the CEO goes rogue and starts censoring half the user base because of political disagreements. That Twitter required a strong leader to come into being, but the people didn't retain the political power to say, no, you're censoring, get ready, because political control and leadership were tied and married together. I think that a network that can honor a leader and follow a leader, yet has the power to check the leader whenever they, for example, like Steemit, the leader sold out to Tron, someone they didn't believe in, and they just forked and started a whole new community. They had the power to put a check on the leadership and maintain the community. And the same thing can apply here. I think it's a very powerful concept of, you got political power, which needs to represent the will and consensus of the people. And then you've got leadership that's leading them. And if you have political power without a leader, it's chaos, right? Because no one knows who to follow. You're going to elect someone and there's no vision. But when you have a leader and a political process that kind of backs and provides that check, now you've got, I think, the best of both worlds. So I'm attempting to do the best I can to cast a vision that will see EOS grow, see EOS thrive, make EOS usable, and that's what I'm trying to do. And hopefully I am successful at casting that vision, and enough people that control the political power within the ecosystem will support the vision. And I think that that's a beautiful symbiotic relationship between I guess, ENF, which I kind of view as, I guess, the political power of the network right now, the block producers backing ENF and so forth. And then I'm the soft leadership of the community. And the two have to come into alignment for success. And I think sums up from my perspective, the relationship between us is a check and balance.
And that check and balance exists between the ENF and the other working groups within the other teams working as well. It's replicated throughout, right? So that's also a fractal, essentially.
Yep. So I really want to thank you guys for organizing this call. And I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, like 2 hours in almost.